So we'll get started in just about 1 minute. Welcome to the DataFest award ceremony for our 10th annual DataFest. Just going to wait for the participants to enter as it takes a little bit of time. All right, let's get the show on the road. So I'm joined today with my colleague who helps organize the DataFest at UCLA, Dr. Linda Zananchian, and our lead DataFest judge, Mark Hancock, who's a professor of statistics at UCLA. What do we have in store for you today? I think you're going to see some really fantastic team entries. I want to say a word to everyone who participated. You know, this has been a really difficult year for everyone, and you wouldn't know it by looking at the work. A high quality work. Everyone was very impressed. It was a difficult, challenging problem, and you guys did a great job. The purpose of DataFest is really an educational one, and so I hope everyone learned something new, either about themselves or about data science or statistics. I want to thank our very large panel of judges. We had 31 judges who were helping watch and evaluate the projects that were submitted. And they come from both industry and academics, and include several former DataFesters themselves. Again, thank you for our sponsors. We went over the very generous contributions of our sponsors at the kickoff ceremony, but I just wanted to take an opportunity to thank them one more time. And this includes our special sponsors, Scott Shoemaker, who pledged $25,000 over the 5 years, so thank you very much. And we also want to thank the companies that did matching for the donations. This is the time when the work is finally done, and so it's another good chance to acknowledge the really hard work of the students committee that organized DataFest. They did lots of things behind the scenes. One of our most successful fundraising years ever is just one example. I really hope that you'll consider joining this committee for next year when we will be back live in person on campus. And we're really looking forward to that as well. So again, thank you to the entire team for your hard work. And a special thanks to Isabel and Michelle for the work they did organizing. Okay, just a few things about how judging happened. As you know, the teams presented 5-minute videos and a 1-page written summary. And the judges voted on panels, and each panel discussed the rankings and reached a consensus. And prizes were awarded in 3 categories. Oops, it says most creative. It should be best use of external data, best visualization, and best insight. This year, the judges chose honorable mentions for every category, but the best visualization award will receive 2 honorable mentions. As we announce the prizes in each category, we will begin with the honorable mentions. Another prize category is a judge's prize. And these are prizes when the judges feel that there were valuable contributions that did not fit into the schema of these 3 categories. And this year, there are 2 judges' prizes that we'll announce. These are full prizes along with all the other prizes. So again, it was a successful competition and lots of good work. What do the winners receive? So the winners of the judges' prizes and the main prizes will receive a DataFest medallion and a 1-year membership to the American Statistical Association. Those who receive honorable mentions will get a certificate and a 1-year membership to the American Statistical Association. We'll be posting all these videos very soon, and we'll post the winners first, and then as soon as place a high priority on that. I think some of them are posted already, but I don't want to vouch for that. But let's just say in 2 weeks, and then the rest will be posted after June 15th. So all of the videos will be available there for you to see. Oh, and one quick thing is at the end, we're going to show you, if you did win, we're going to show you an email address that we're going to ask you to send your names to so that we can send you your prizes. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Professor Hancock to announce the prizes.
Good evening. My name is Mark Hancock. As Rob has mentioned, I'm the lead judge, and I'd like to thank you all on behalf of the judges for what is a wonderful set of videos that reflect the very interesting and innovative analyses you have done. So we're very much looking forward to working for these awards. So let's move ahead to the next slide.
It's ready now, so just say the winner.
Okay, so the winner, this is the, I'm actually just seeing the judges' prize. The judges' choice award is YYDS Plus. You can see the group names there. And this, the judges felt was very much worthy of a prize for their overall analysis of drug misuse behaviours amongst non-stereotypical populations, in particular healthcare professionals and college students. We'd like to move ahead and see their video.
Hello, we are Team YYDS, and our members are Yixing Chen, Shiman Zhang, Zhiqi Zhang, Deyi Zhu. Today, we're going to present a topic on how are healthcare professionals who are educated in medical practice more likely to misuse drugs than the average person. The stereotypes surrounding drug abuse are often associated with those who fall into lower income brackets and are poorly educated. To investigate the validity of such stereotypes, we analyzed drug misuse trends within the HCPs and college student population from the US 18Q1 dataset and used external data sources to further examine the impact of social pressures on drug misuse.
We plotted a pattern of drug misuse and total household income between HCP and non-HCP. Non-HCP follow the expected but slight pattern that the higher household income level one is in, the less likely one is to misuse drugs. However, the pattern for HCP is significantly different. For almost all income levels and during all time ranges, HCP have a higher rate of drug misuse than non-HCP. Two modes of the drug misuse rate among HCP occur at the middle and upper middle level of household income. This might suggest that HCP are more likely to misuse drugs, even knowing the dangerous outcome, and such behavior is not correlated to their financial situations. We further investigate what prescription drugs are misused. We noticed that HCP have an overall higher chance for non-medical use of prescription drugs, which might be explained by the fact that HCP have more access to them. THC, cannabinoid, marijuana is an interesting drug. It is popular for non-medical use in both groups and seems to be more popular in non-HCP than HCP by 10%.
It is surprising to see that portions of HCPs also have significant drug abuse behaviors, despite that most of them have been through medical school. Thus, we approach the impact of medical training from a different perspective. We predict that HCPs' drug abuse behaviors may date back to their intense medical school experience. We analyzed an external source that collected anonymous survey results on wellness of medical students. From the graph, a significant result would be that 46.9% of prescription stimulant users have increased use during medical school. Also, 64.3% of stimulant users admitted taking pills that were not prescribed for them, and 55.2% of admitted stimulant users were never prescribed. According to the data, primary reasons for stimulant or opioid use are helping study, staying awake, and relieving pain, which all attributed to the competitive nature of medical school. So it is reasonable to say that academic pressure may override healthcare education and lead to increasing drug abuse behaviors.
Following analysis of HCP and non-HCP drug misuse trends, we analyzed the college population. College students tend to misuse drugs more frequently than non-college population based on analysis of drug misuse during the past 90 days. Opioid is the top misused drug. Now transitioning to illicit drugs. Like prescription drugs, college students have used more illicit drugs than non-college counterpart, both in their lifetime and in the past 30 days, with cannabis being the top abuse category. From the graph on the left, we can see that private college students misuse prescription and illicit drugs more frequently than those who go to public universities. Those who are involved in Greek life or live on campus also tend to misuse drugs more frequently than those who do not, which might suggest that social environments have an impact on drug misuse tendency.
In conclusion, the data sample shows patterns that are inconsistent with the drugs abusing stereotype. Convenient access to drugs and strong academic or social pressure might be the reason why HCPs and college students might have higher rate of abusing drugs. The habits of abusing drugs might be developed during the college life. Therefore, more regulations are needed, and we suggest that access to the most popular drugs, cannabis and opioid, should be controlled in college, and HCPs should be monitored when accessing prescription drugs in workplace. Thank you.
That was very interesting and very good. I think the judges really enjoyed the overall balance between the numerical and graphical summaries and the fact that they were to give us a grand tour of the subpopulations involved. So very great credit to YYDS Plus for their very good work. The next judges prize is given to Team Seichen for visualization in their analysis of non-medical opioid usage among American 18 to 24-year-olds in 2018. So this is mainly given for visualization. So let's see what Team Seichen has done.
For this year's DataFest, Team Seichen decided to look into non-medical opioid use among American 18 to 24-year-olds in 2018. Americans are no stranger to the threat that opioids play in society. They reach all corners of demographics, including students. The lifetime estimate for prescription opioid misuse among general population of students ranged from 4% to 19.7%, with higher estimates for special student populations. There's clearly an opioid problem in the country, and here we can see it among young adults. As college sophomores, members of this age range, we wanted to focus on this group.
Our goal was to find patterns related to substance abuse to help identify future drug misuse cases. As such, we decided to focus on the question, which variables are predictors for students aged 18 to 24 of non-medical lifetime opioid usage? We hope that by pinpointing such predictors, early identification of drug misuse may be possible. Young people have a greater ability to recover from an opioid addiction since they have fewer years of addiction behind them. This makes early prevention and intervention crucial in the long-term fight against the opioid epidemic.
We primarily used 4 binary variables to build our model. 3 of them came from the existing data set, and we created a 4th variable showing marijuana legality by state, with 0 being illegal and 1 being fully legal by the end of the first quarter of 2018. These variables all seem to contribute to the probability of an 18 to 24-year-old college student using opioids non-medically and are all statistically significant. On this next slide, we see a general map of the percentage of people aged 18 to 24 who have used opioids non-medically. Darker colors represent a higher percentage of respondents using opioids non-medically, and gray represents a state with no data or fewer than 10 respondents. It's interesting to note that 13 states have a percentage above 20%, with 6 states having a percentage above 25%. This shows that the opioid problem in our country amongst young people does differ by state, and our variable for marijuana legality, which differs by state, tries to control for this.
Since our response variable was a binary variable, we decided to use a logistic regression. So our model was built using forward stepwise regression, using AIC as the criterion for variable inclusion. But since we knew that we were doing multiple comparisons, we checked for significance in each variable by using a home correction in order to control the family-wise error rate. Next, we used k-fold cross-validation with a k equal to 4 to make sure we weren't overfitting the data. This plot shows the different ROC curves across the different folds. And since the model coefficients and the AUC estimates were the same across each fold, we deemed this model to be equipped to predict for data on another survey.
As for our key findings, as said, the 4 variables we looked at are statistically significant. So this graph shows that all variables contribute to a prediction of non-medical lifetime opioid use for students aged 18 to 24, where the larger bars represent those variables that contribute more to this model. So specifically, being female decreases a person's odds of non-medical lifetime opioid use, as does not having a mental health disorder. Those that increase it are being involved in a frat or a sorority, as well as being in a state where marijuana is legal. So this points us towards traits that are important to look at in people to hopefully address opioid use before it might become an addiction. Those traits being male, having a mental health disorder, being involved in Greek life, and living in a state where marijuana is legal.
In conclusion, our analysis shows that certain factors may be associated with lifetime occurrence of opioid drug misuse. As is the nature of observational studies, we cannot determine any causation. However, our work can still help identify which populations are at risk for drug misuse. Some next steps that we hope to take are to reproduce our analysis using a representative sample of the population, as well as by running our model on datasets from different years. We hope that our findings will assist in early identification of at-risk populations, as well as to reinforce future clinical studies that can test the efficacy of drug abuse prevention and intervention programs. Thank you for your time. We hope you enjoyed our presentation.
Wonderful. I thought it was very good, especially to look at the spatial variation and other components like that. A very clear presentation. Very good work, Sei-Chen. The next award is for the best use of external data, and it's the honorable mention in that category. And it is Bruins. We have a title. Here we go. Congratulations. And their award was for the use of both state level data on marijuana legalization law and the counts of drug related arrests in their analysis of state level drug use.
Hello, everyone. This is Team Bruins. We are a team of 4 first-year undergraduates. So let's get into it.
So after thinking a lot about the data we have and what type of questions we could ask, we all agreed upon this question, which is, do states' laws and arrests make a difference on the drug use that goes on in each of these states?
So for our methodology, we used a deep neural net. We tried to predict, given a person's drug use history, whether or not they lived in a state where marijuana was legal or not, and if it was legal, was it medically legal or was it recreationally legal? And so for this, we used external data sets to compile data on marijuana legalization laws, as well as drug arrest rates in each state in order to measure how strictly they enforce their drug laws. And then we tried to predict which type of state a respondent would live in based on their drug use in order to see if the model issued different predictions for different levels of drug use, meaning like if a respondent used more drugs or fewer drugs, whether or not it would change which type of state it would predict that they lived in. And we used the 2018 and 2019 US data.
So some external data that we tried to pull in was the marijuana laws based on the legalization. And what we did was we took this 2018 midterm report based on the national conference of state legislators, and we wanted to rank the states on the legalization levels, 1 being not legal at all, and 4 being legalization of recreational and medical marijuana. So with that, we wanted to connect it to whether there would be more people using harder drugs. And we also wanted to do the same thing with drug arrest laws. So what we did was we took the FBI Uniform Crime Reporting Program. What they do is they publish arrests by states. So what we did was we took the 2018 report and we divided the number of drug arrests by the number of total arrests. We got a percentage of drug arrests. And what we did was we ranked those on a scale of 1 to 51. And we want to see which states were more strict on making drug arrests, which states were least strict on making drug arrests. And we want to see if a state was more strict, would they have users that take harder drugs more often?
So at the end, the conclusion that we came to was that the legality of marijuana in a particular state doesn't affect the drug use in that state. So that even though that some states have marijuana legal laws and some are illegal, there's no statistical difference between the drug use in each of these states.
So we can look at the data. Oh, the screen sharing is disabled.
I just enabled it.
Thank you. So looking at the data, basically in our model, we passed through just 10 examples, vectors, which represent people. And basically you can see here, based on the drugs that they use, as we just said, it didn't matter what drugs they used, the model outputted the same number. And that number is representative of the states. So as you can see, all 10 outputted the number 3. And now we can see what that number means. If we look at the map here, based on our external data, we basically categorize each state based on the legality. And 3 here shows the states in the darkest green. And that's representative of states where marijuana is legalized, recreational use of marijuana is legalized. So basically the states with the loosest marijuana laws, the people that we put through the model are all predicted to be in these states.
So some difficulties that we came across was the model constraint for the police arrest data. As we saw, we were able to get the marijuana one working, but the police arrest data was not able to correctly work with our neural network. And also the data extrapolation of just finding the arrests versus the arrest for drug use versus total number of arrests was sort of off, and we sort of had to, it was a good idea, but it was hard in execution. And I think that's something, if we had more time, that's something we totally would have gone for. Also the availability of data and our team being across the country was a lot of the difficulties that we came across. So thank you guys for watching. This is an amazing DataFest, although it was virtual. We really enjoyed it. Thank you guys.
That was an excellent report. It shows both the advantages and the challenges of bringing in external data, especially multiple sources of external data. So congratulations to the Bruins for their achievement. The next award is best use of external data. This is the first prize. The winner is No Free Lunch. For their investigation of how non-medical drug use correlates with police density and what policing variables predict drug use in the United States. Nice job.
Hello, our presentation is on recreational drugs and police data. Our team name is No Free Lunch. Our team members are Cassandra, Wilson, Yelin, Tara, and Amy. The research questions that we proposed were, how does non-medical drug usage correlate with police density by state for different drugs? And also, what policing variables predict drug use of different drugs? The methods we used were to clean our data and normalize it by mean. Then we found external policing data and calculated per capita of arrests and police density, and combined all of our selected variables into one data file. We then ran regression on all drug data variables against police per capita and against drug arrest per capita. We then created scatter plots with our regression models for visualization and ran summary stats to find any significant p-values. We then ran lowest smoothing to check for nonlinearity on all drug variables against police per capita and against drug arrest per capita. We then also plotted our lowest models to visualize for any nonlinearity and to check for different smoothing fractions. Finally, we created chloropleth maps to visualize all drug variables police per capita, and drug arrest per capita by states. The final variables that we analyzed were states, opioids, bends, stimulants, GABA, and illegal use. The external variables that we created were police per capita and drug abuse arrests per capita. The regression models for police per capita versus our selected drug variables showed that there were no significant p-values at an alpha level 0.05. And our graphs also showed that there is no correlation in our regression line. Similar findings were discovered for drug arrest versus our selected drugs. We had no significant p-values at alpha level 0.05, except for illegal use, which had a p-value less than 0.011. Moving forward, our lowest smoothing scatter plots also showed similar results. This is our police per capita, which shows very insignificant non-linearity against all of our drug variables. Similarly, for arrest per capita, there was insignificant non-linearity against all variables for the drugs. Finding number one, that was policing and arrests have no impact on recreational drug use. We now move forward to our chloropleth maps. This first one is police density by state, and top 3 states were Delaware, New Hampshire, and New Mexico. Density of recreational drug usage by state is displayed here for opioids, bends, GABA, and stimulants. The density of recreational drug use, specifically opioids by states, is displayed in this map. The states with highest opioid use are Louisiana, which ranked number 5 in police density, and Washington, which was number 50 in police density. Now, our states with lowest opioid use were New Mexico, which ranked number 3 in police density, and Wisconsin, which ranked number 46 in police density. Finding number 2 was that higher policing is associated with reduced illegal drug use. So we have a chloropleth map of drug abuse arrests. Our top 3 states were Wyoming, South Dakota, and Missouri. Density of illicit drug use by state is displayed in this map. States with the highest illicit drug use were Washington, which ranked number 3 in illicit drug use, and ranked number 42 in drug abuse arrests. And our states with the lowest illicit drug use were South Dakota, which ranked number 50 in illicit drug use and ranked number 2 in drug abuse arrests. Our overall findings was that recreational drugs has no correlation with police density. And here are our works cited for our external policing data found through the FBI website. Thank you very much.
That was excellent work. Not only was the external data well used, but the presentation was extremely clear and very well drawn. So congratulations to No Free Lunch. The next award is the Best Visualization category, and it's honorable mention. And the award goes...
This is the first of 2 honorable mentions.
First of 2. Thank you, Rob. The winner of that is Armageddon for their clear visualization of quantitative information in their analysis of drug misuse in America. Congratulations.
Hi everyone, we're Ethan and Dara from Team Armageddon. For this year's DataFest, we looked at the United States 2018 data to identify which variables were stronger predictors of drug misuse. So for our predictors of misuse, we looked at total misuse and any misuse, which we took from summing the different drug misuses, as well as dust from the data set itself. So looking at this chart of proportion of misuse by drug, as well as the income level, with the darker bars representing drugs that are more expensive, we see that regardless of income level, the top 5 drugs seem to be the same, which are oxycodone, hydrocodone, codeine, benzodiazepines, as well as stimulants. We also observe that these drugs tend to be more expensive.
And then on a similar note, we noticed that there are some pockets of problems, codeine with Alaska, benzodiazepine with Alaska, stimulants with Louisiana, but on the whole, we see that these drugs tend to be a national issue, not necessarily a regional one. And then we looked at some interactions here. Race was not as big of a factor as we thought it was, but age was a significant factor. The darker colors representing higher levels of misuse occur in the lower age brackets. Alcohol, again, surprisingly, less alcohol use was linked with higher levels of drug misuse, but that cannabis, number 2, that's recently using cannabis, that was a high link with higher levels of drug misuse. Education and income, this one isn't surprising when you consider just in general risk, but if you look at had they misused any drugs, then we have a different story. We see that the PhD, the high education levels with an only okay income level, they actually had quite a bit of a standout there. Chronic pain and acute pain, we see that acute pain prescriptions are much more likely to be abused than the chronic pain if they were both provided recently, showing that it might be sort of a gut feeling rather than a consistent problem that you could potentially deal with.
So in terms of influential variables, one thing we did was to look at chi-square tests for demographic variables against different drug misuses. And we see that the race and veteran status, which are indicated in green, have the highest levels of p-values, which indicate that these two are not very strong predictors of drug misuse. We also looked at political affiliation using the 2018 election results, and we don't seem to see a strong affiliation with one specific party and the proportion of misuse. However, if we look at this bar chart here, with the red indicating strong Republican affiliation and the blue indicating strong Democratic affiliation, we see that the bars with stronger affiliation tend to have higher proportions of misuse, whereas bars which are lighter in color, which indicate less of an affiliation towards either party, tend to have lower levels of misuse. So that indicates that it's not so much which party you're affiliated with, but how strong your affiliation is that influences your misuse levels.
Yeah, and one thing that we also did notice is that we looked at the random forest and generalized linear regression models in terms of seeing variable importance. So we did random forest to see which one led to the greatest increase in MSE when it was changed. And we saw that misuse from beforehand was a strong indicator. So if you misused before, you could be likely to misuse again. Age brackets were also a pretty distinct one. And then one thing that's obviously missing from here is that race variable, once again, which leads us into our conclusion. One, just reiterating, hydrocodone, codeine, oxycodone, benzodiazepine, stimulants, those are the 5 sort of really drugs that you should watch out for in the United States for misuse. And then how to identify prior misuse, again, age brackets, younger people. Higher education levels, if you're looking for any drug misuse, not necessarily a lot, you might want to consider higher levels of education. That could be something interesting to consider. Acute pain prescriptions, much stronger driver of misuse than chronic pain prescriptions. And then race is not as strong of a factor as many people believe, as we showed throughout the entirety of our presentation. And really, those are the main takeaways for this. Here are some links to our data. And then all in all, there are many ways to combat misuse, but the biggest thing is that we do something. Thank you.
Yes, that display shows an excellent use of fundamental graphics to understand drug misuse. So very nice work. The second honorable mention in the best visualization category goes to We Are Stats for visualizing the distribution of mental health problems among 3 social groups and the non-medical use of drugs.
Welcome to the presentation of our group We Are Stats today, and I'm Huanfei. Our research is based on the survey of non-medical use of prescription drugs program in 2019 US. According to the report of the US Department of Veteran Affairs, many older veterans find they have symptoms of mental health issues. So we filled out 3 most frequently used drugs and investigated the distribution of mental health problems among different social groups and non-medical use on these drugs. Finally, we got several points to logistic regression that may be valuable for further exploration.
We create a dashboard that highlights the features of entire population to visualize their interactions. The top left shows the overall distribution of US participants. The top right contains the basic information about these individuals. The bottom left shows the distribution of 3 social groups and their type of role. The lower right contains the distribution of people with no medical use of the top 3 non-prescription medication during their lifetime. We first look at the population with no medical use history. Once I filter out one drug, the other 2 drugs show greatly increased proportions, indicate that the people who have misused one type of drug can exhibit higher likelihood of misuse the other 2. We then look at the people with mental health problems. From map, we can see that California, Texas, and Florida have relatively higher distribution than other states. Ventilators are slightly more likely to develop mental health problems compared with students and healthcare providers. We know that ventilators have combat stress, so their mental health condition may have intensified when they enter society. Based on the information above, we decide to target the ventilator population to explore their non-medical use pattern.
Here's a graph that characterizes the demographic distribution of only the veteran population. As we can see, the proportion of veterans with past mental conditions reached a point as high as 77%, which confirmed our initial interest in the social group. Within those 77%, we find that over 3/4 of them had non-medical use history across all 3 of the most frequently used drugs. The majority of this group can be characterized as being over 65 years old, male, white, with an annual income around the average level. Based on the extremely high proportion of non-medical use of drugs, as well as severe mental conditions among the veterans, we decided to further explore whether having a mental condition will increase the likelihood of a veteran for drug misuse and whether the veteran itself is a high-risk population more subjected to non-medical use than other social groups.
Next, we aggregate our visualization in the 3 logistic regression models with the non-medical use of 3 selected drugs as the binary response variables. We include the veteran status and mental health issue history as the tutorial main predictors while controlling for age, genders, income, and races. The table below shows regression coefficient as odd ratios as the corresponding p-values. If a ratio is larger than 1, then the predictor is possibly correlated to the response. We observed that among controls, higher age, higher income, and the white race displayed negative correlation with MMU frequency, while the male gender displayed positive. For main variables, the veteran status has more than 1 and mostly insignificant coefficients, while mental health issues as predictors showed positive and strong significance. In an additional model, we also found a positive significant interaction between main variables, while the inclusion of interaction terms did not affect the estimation of other variables. What is more, these estimates are consistent across all drugs investigated. In conclusion, while there is no evidence that being a veteran itself is correlated with higher MMU of drugs, there is a strong significance. Combine the fact of being veteran and having mental health issues. It is worthy for fully further investigate the relationship between military service and mental health problems. The latter leads to higher MMU of drugs.
In conclusion, we were able to arrive at 3 main points through our analysis. Firstly, we were not able to see a strong relationship between being a veteran and an increase in MMU. Secondly, we found that mental health issues do have a strong relationship with higher NMU. Lastly, we were able to establish that the combined effect of both mental health and military service has a strong relationship with an increase in non-medical usage of prescribed drugs. Since we were only able to derive this relationship for a combined effect of mental health and being a veteran, our future steps would be to do further research to understand the relationship between 2 variables, mental health and military service. Thank you.
Excellent. It was an elegant use of superior graphics. Very well done, We Are Stats. The next award is Best Visualization. First prize, Stackers, for an outstanding and clearly visualized analysis of cannabis legality and drug misuse.
Hi, my name's Maddie.
My name's Ben.
My name is Andrew.
My name is Genesis.
And we looked at the relationship between the legality of cannabis in the US and its effect on drug misuse. We first tried to look for patterns in the data by identifying potential correlations between demographic data collected from the survey and instances of drug misuse. To tackle this problem, we created categories of drug misuse based on how recently the participant had used illicit drugs or prescription drugs for non-medical use and overconsumed alcohol or tobacco. We labeled these categories as high, medium, and low to no risk. We then used a random forest classifier to look for patterns. One pattern that caught our attention was that the use of cannabis in the last 90 days was a major predictor of risk level and had a high recall score. This pattern led us to question how availability of cannabis due to varying levels of legality in different US states is correlated with drug misuse. We define misuse as either the use of illicit drugs, excluding cannabis, or the use of prescription drugs, either without a prescription or outside the intended purposes of the medication, also called non-medical use.
We decided that because the survey data was collected in early 2019, we will use states' cannabis laws from 2018 to accurately determine legality at the time the data was collected. As we researched state laws, we placed states into three categories: states where cannabis in any form was illegal, states where cannabis was decriminalized or allowed medical marijuana, and states where recreational marijuana was allowed. We hypothesized that citizens of states where cannabis was legal would have more access to cannabis. We believed that cannabis would act as a gateway drug, and thus this higher availability would be associated with higher rates of drug misuse.
After our analysis, we noticed a pattern that as the availability of marijuana increased due to legality, the use of illicit drugs by participants also increased. In states where all forms of marijuana are illegal, roughly 4% of participants had used illicit drugs in the past year, compared to roughly 6% of participants in states that have legalized recreational marijuana. However, as legality increased, there was no conclusive change in the non-medical use by participants.
In order to visualize the data, we used a choropleth graph that filters by state legality as well as drug misuse category. The color of a state's border represents the cannabis legality in 2018, and the fill color represents the percentage of drug misuse. We chose to visualize part of our medium risk drug misuse category, or illicit or NMU or either drug misuse in the past year. As you can see from the graph, we can visualize by both misuse and state legality. If we click NMU rec, here I filtered for NMU misuse in states where cannabis is allowed for recreational use. If you look at the info box at the top of the screen, you can see that Colorado had 6.01% of respondents report doing an NMU drug in the past year. Now, if I filter by illicit illegal, I can see that in Texas, where cannabis is illegal, 5.32% of respondents reported using an illicit non-cannabis drug in the past year. You can view the visualization at the link on the slide, which is a private link and not publicly available. If you want to see more of our visualization, visit the link ben.ohrbureau.com/datafest. Again, this link is a private link and is not publicly available.
Through the data, we found that in states with looser cannabis laws, there are higher proportions of participants who had used illicit drugs in the past year. However, there was almost no change in proportions of participants who had non-medical drug use in the past year across states with different cannabis laws. Due to the scope of inference of this data, we are not allowed to draw larger conclusions or generalizations to the US population. However, we believe that the pattern of illicit drug use increasing in states with looser cannabis laws could warrant future research. This research would be incredibly timely and can have a large impact on the ways we move forward regarding drug legalization and other healthcare public policy. Our clients can benefit from this by conducting further research into if cannabis use is related to NMU or illicit drug misuse in Colorado. If it is, doctors, therapists, and other medical personnel staff could alert cannabis users of the dangers of drug misuse and take early preventative measures. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
It was an excellent version. The judges felt it was the use of clear, uncluttered graphics, the idea of spatial indexing to help, and also simple animations. All of these led to a very, very nice analysis. So congratulations to the stackers. We now have the Honourable Mention Award for Best Insight. Congratulations, the Stat Pack, for their combination of visual and statistical analyses of the relationships amongst age, drug use, and mental health disorders.
Hello, we are the Stat Pack, and this is our presentation for DataFest 2021, analyzing the relationships among age, drug use, and mental health disorders.
For an overview of our presentation, we will cover our areas of interest, our exploratory analysis, analytic goals, findings and visualizations, analysis and conclusions, and future research questions. As mentioned previously, our areas of interest are age, mental health disorders, and drugs.
In our early exploration of the US 2019 dataset, we found that we were provided a vast amount of data. Many variables were limited in sample size and were difficult to draw conclusions from. These include less common mental health disorders and less widely used substances. Due to this, we narrowed down our analysis to a few of the most commonly used drugs: opioids, sedatives, hydrocodone, and codeine, as graphed to the right. We did the same for a few of the most common diagnosed mental disorders: anxiety, depression, PTSD, and bipolar disorder.
Continuing our exploration with a more focused approach, we found patterns in graphing the age distributions of survey participants, particularly when comparing age groups by opioid and other substance use and by mental health issues. In our initial histograms, younger populations appear to be using both illicit and prescription drugs, while also reporting high rates of mental health issues of all kinds, particularly anxiety and depression.
We were interested in further exploring the intersection of these issues, seeking to identify any trends associated with various drug usage and mental health disorders, drug usage with age, and mental health disorders and age.
We created a heat map that reflects the magnitude of drug usage for various mental health disorders. Most significantly, we observed opioids are the most heavily used by those with anxiety, followed by sedatives. We also found that opioids are the most common drug used by those with depression, bipolar disorder, ADHD, and PTSD.
Next, we used proportion bar plots to visualize the usage of non-prescribed versus prescribed drugs among different age groups. We observed that most non-medically prescribed drug usage pervades younger age groups, most prominently for codeine and hydrocodone. Finally, we used bar plots to demonstrate the abuse rates of our 5 selected substances and how those abuse rates among people with different mental health conditions. In general, most people who use these substances have a prescription. While our heat map indicated that opioids and sedatives are most heavily used by people with anxiety, these bar plots show that compared to users with bipolar disorder, PTSD, or ADHD, a relatively low % of users with anxiety are using these drugs without prescription. In fact, the highest rates of non-medical usage for all 5 of these drugs are among people with bipolar disorder, PTSD, and ADHD.
Finally, I will conclude and summarize what we've talked about. Of those diagnosed with some form of anxiety, we found that they were using opioids and sedatives the most. And among our 5 mental health disorders, opioids were the most prevalent drug used across all groups. And while the actual proportion of medical use drugs was not the actual proportion of non-medical use to medical use drugs was not very large, but the distribution of proportions remained relatively consistent across these drugs. Consistently, those with ADHD, PTSD, or bipolar disorder were more inclined to abuse non-medically prescribed drugs than those with anxiety or depression.
Some questions to look into for future research would be why people choose to take the drugs that they take, and whether high rates of non-prescription drug use by people with certain conditions suggest a need for these people to be prescribed medicine. Furthermore, we limited our analysis to the United States, and further research would be needed to determine if these trends are common in other countries as well. And a special thanks to the Rocky Mountain Poison and Drug Safety Center for donating their data sets, and to the ASA and Useful Waste Statistics Club for hosting DataFest. Thank you guys so much.
Congratulations to the Stack Pack for their combination of visual and statistical analysis. Very, very nice work, very insightful. We now come to the final award, the first prize award for the best insight. And the winner is K-Bandits for a multifaceted and coherent analysis of the characteristics among students, healthcare professionals, and veterans in the United States that determine their use of benzodiazepines. Congratulations, K-Bandits.
Hi everyone, we're Team K Bandits.
I'm Tiffany.
I'm Justina. I'm Diana.
And I'm Kiana.
So our project focused on exploring which characteristics among students, healthcare professionals, and veterans determine the use of benzodiazepines, also known as BZDs, in a sample of participants in the United States during 2018. BZDs are a type of drug that produces sedation and lowers anxiety levels, and some common names of BZDs that you may know are Valium and Xanax. According to the National Institute on Drug Abuse, 60% of overdose deaths involving opioids also involved BZDs. And between 1996 and 2013, the number of adults who filled a BZD prescription increased by 67% to over 13.5 million. This fact is alarming since BZDs are, unfortunately, frequently abused by being taken with alcohol and or other drugs. So the increase in filled BZD prescriptions raises a flag, as it can potentially lead to an increased rate of drug abuse. For this reason, our project is important in terms of bringing insight on the risk factors of BZD use among the sample participants.
For data preparation, we conducted feature engineering by first creating a new response variable that categorized BZD use into no use, medical use, and non-medical use. We also created two new predictor variables that classified whether or not the participant has used drugs other than BZD, both medically and non-medically, in their lifetime, respectively. Then we separated the data into 3 data sets according to occupation. After that, for each occupation, we implemented random forest models and used the variable importance outputs to select variables with mean decreases in accuracy above the 3rd quartile, where higher decreases indicate higher importance.
During our model selection process, we used both a validation set approach and tenfold cross-validation to evaluate models using random forest, bagging, multinomial logistic regression, and support vector machines. After comparing our models, we selected multinomial logistic regression as the final model since it performed well and produced results that were interpretable. As you can see from the table below, our final models show cross-validation accuracies from 68 to 80% and validation set accuracies from 70 to 80% for the 3 occupations. So we're able to predict BZD use with high accuracy for all 3 occupations.
To better understand what specific categories contributed most to BZD use in each occupation in our sample, we categorized the predictors into 4 categories: those related to mental health, history of prescriptions for opioids for pain, history of drug use, and demographics. The numbers represent mean % decrease in accuracy for each category. From the plot, we can see that in our sample, students' BZD use was influenced strongly by the drug and pain categories, while veterans were influenced most by the mental health and pain categories, and health professionals had a similar influence across all categories. This is consistent with the variable importance plots we generated for the 30 most important variables for each occupation. Looking at the most important predictors for BZD use in our sample, we see that for students, the most important predictor was if they had a history of using other drugs. For health professionals and veterans, the 2 most important predictors were whether they had a history of anxiety or mental illness.
Keeping the variable importance plots in mind, we wanted to take a closer look at how exactly the most important predictors influence BZD use in each occupation in our sample. For multi-drug use, there is a significant influence on BZD use for all occupations. Almost 100% of participants who have used BZD, both medically and non-medically, have also used other drugs in their lifetime. We also see the highest proportion of non-medical use of BZD, given a history of drug use for students. Taking a closer look at participants who have used other drugs non-medically besides BZD in their lifetime, we see that they are far more likely to also misuse BZD. For mental health histories, participants with mental health histories have higher instances of using BZD. For chronic pain, veterans have the largest proportion of BZD use given a history of prescriptions of opioids for chronic pain, followed by health professionals.
And lastly, age is significant for veterans, with more younger participants having a history of non-medical use of BZDs. Health professionals also show a similar pattern, but not as distinct. Overall, our findings indicate that in our sample, having a history of drug use, mental illness, and prescriptions for opioids for treating pain are important in predicting the use of BZD for all 3 occupations. But the largest impacts for each occupation were a history of drug use for students, mental illness and opioid prescriptions for pain for veterans, and there were similar influences for each category for health professionals. It is important to note that our data was not a representative sample of all US residents in 2018, so we cannot generalize our results to the larger population. However, our findings could still demonstrate the importance of investigating the unique differences in determining BZD use for each occupation, which would lead into interventions such as targeted programs to reduce BZD misuse in each occupation. Hopefully, with these insights, we can make a positive impact on the lives of those affected by the misuse of BZDs in the United States. Thank you for listening.
What an excellent job for Kay Bandits. That really was a very, very strong combination of various visualization methods, analysis, and clarity of presentation. On behalf of the 31 judges who viewed the videos and read the written reports, it really was a joy. And we were reminded about how much DataFest is about creativity overall. All of the teams showed great skills in data wrangling, data analysis, modeling, and presentation. We had to choose the ones that we thought were the strongest amongst them all. But the efforts made by each of the teams, I think, were very laudable. The judges were very impressed. The other things, as we were reminded, is DataFest is about teams, not individuals, and how individuals on the teams brought diversity of viewpoints and skills to all of the challenging problems that were involved. And I think the work that was presented really showed this. So on behalf of the judges, congratulations to all. I'll now hand back to Rob.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. And on behalf of all of the organizers, thanks to you and the judges for your very difficult decisions you had to make. I know there were some very fine lines drawn in some places. For those who don't know, the data set this year had well over 500 variables. And I think one of the biggest challenges was just narrowing it down and coming up with what the area of focus was. And I think you saw that in some of these, the winning entries we played tonight. And I saw it throughout all of the entries, even the ones that we unfortunately couldn't show tonight. So I think, that deserves, that's a theme of DataFest, that you spend a lot of time crafting the story. It was interesting to see so many interactive graphics and dashboards this year too, which we haven't seen before. So final words, if you did win a prize, please send an email to Linda Zananchian at linda@stat.ucla.edu. We need your name, your team name, and your address so that we can mail the prizes to you. The first shipment of swag boxes have gone out, I'm told. So those will be arriving in the next, rolling them out over the next couple of weeks. Linda, do you have anything to say? Any logistics?
Like you mentioned, the swag boxes, they're gone out. There's a second batch going out. You should have gotten an email from me verifying your address. That second batch will go out next week. And if you're an international student and you're returning in the fall, we're going to be holding your box for you and personally giving it to you when you arrive.
Yeah, so Ethan asks, what subject should we put in the email? Probably something like DataFest winners will flag it for us, but we'll find you. We know who you are, we just don't know your address. All right, well, congratulations to everyone again. Whether you won or not, you did a great job. This was a tough competition and difficult guidelines in a very short time to do a very lot of data analysis. So congratulations to you all, and I look forward to seeing as many of you as possible next year. Thank you.